The massive alien ship appeared over New York without warning. It simply materialized there one morning, hanging in the sky like a metallic cloud. The world's military forces scrambled their jets and readied their missiles, but the ship made no aggressive moves. Instead, it broadcasted a simple message in perfect English. "We come in peace. We are the Coalition of Advanced Species. We wish to speak with your leaders." In the Pentagon's main conference room, Captain James Miller watched the screens with mixed feelings of wonder and concern. As Earth's newly appointed first contact specialist, he had trained for this moment, but nothing could have truly prepared him for the reality of it. The Coalition representatives were tall, blue-skinned beings who moved with fluid grace. They wore no weapons, only simple white robes with strange symbols that seemed to glow. Their leader, who called himself Observer One, spoke in a calm, measured voice. "We have watched your species for some time," Observer One said, looking around the room at the gathered military and political leaders. "We find you interesting." The human officials shifted uncomfortably in their seats. General Wilson, sitting next to Miller, cleared his throat. "Interesting in what way?" Observer One's large, silver eyes blinked slowly. "Your military technology is primitive by our standards. Your most advanced weapons would barely scratch our smallest vessels. Yet," he paused, head tilting slightly, "yet we find ourselves curious about your methods of warfare." Miller noticed something in the alien's voice. Was it concern? He couldn't be sure, but something about the way Observer One spoke made him think these advanced beings weren't just here out of simple curiosity. The meeting continued for hours. The aliens shared information about their coalition, a vast network of species spanning thousands of light years. They showed holographic displays of their technology that made Earth's most advanced weapons look like children's toys. But they kept coming back to questions about human warfare. "Why do you not follow standard combat protocols?" Observer One asked. "Your military history shows countless examples of forces winning battles they should have lost, using methods that defy logical analysis." Miller found himself speaking up. "With all due respect, sir, there's no such thing as standard combat protocols on Earth. We adapt to each situation as needed." The alien leaders exchanged glances that Miller couldn't interpret. Later that day, as Miller walked through the Pentagon's corridors with General Wilson, he voiced his thoughts. "Sir, did you notice how they kept focusing on our military tactics? They seemed almost worried." The general nodded slowly. "I caught that too. For beings with such advanced technology, they seemed mighty interested in our primitive ways of fighting." The next week brought more meetings, and the coalition announced their decision to send an observation team to study Earth's military forces. They claimed it was standard procedure for new species joining the galactic community, but Miller couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it. On the day the observation team arrived, Miller stood at the designated landing zone at Fort Bradley. The alien ship touched down without a sound, its surface gleaming in the morning sun. 5 coalition observers emerged, each carrying what looked like advanced scanning devices. "Captain Miller," Observer One greeted him. "We look forward to learning about your species' approach to military conflict." "Of course," Miller replied with a polite smile. "Though I should warn you, what you see might not make much sense to you." "That," Observer One said quietly, "is precisely what concerns us." As Miller led the aliens toward the base, he caught snippets of their quiet conversation in their own language. His universal translator picked up words like unpredictable, chaotic, and dangerous. Looking back at the observers, Miller realized something profound. These incredibly advanced beings, with all their technology and power, were afraid of something about humans, not because of our strength or our weapons, but because of something else entirely. He just wasn't sure what that something was. Not yet. 3 weeks into the Coalition's observation of Earth's military forces, Captain Miller watched as Commander Ray Thompson prepared for another demonstration. The aliens had requested to see basic infantry tactics, probably expecting to see something impressive. Instead, Thompson had arranged something much simpler. Today, we're going to show you how human soldiers deal with losing their main weapons, Thompson announced to the 5 observers. They stood at the edge of a training field, their scanning devices humming softly. Observer 1's expression remained neutral. When our forces lose their primary weapons, they retreat to regroup and rearm. This is the only logical response. Thompson smiled. Watch this. Below them, a squad of soldiers began their exercise. Their rifles suddenly malfunctioned as planned. Instead of retreating, the soldiers immediately grabbed whatever was nearby. Branches, rocks, their helmets, even handfuls of dirt. They kept fighting, using the terrain for cover, creating distractions, and moving in completely unpredictable patterns. The alien scanning devices began making strange noises. Observer 3 actually took a step back when a soldier used his broken rifle as a club. This is not correct combat procedure, Observer 2 said, their voice wavering slightly. They should retreat. Why are they not retreating? Miller noticed how the aliens' calm composure had cracked. They kept adjusting their scanners, as if convinced the devices were malfunctioning. Later that day, they moved to the vehicle training grounds. The coalition representatives watched as human tanks performed their maneuvers. Their advanced sensors showed clear disappointment at the primitive nature of Earth's armored vehicles. Your armor cannot withstand energy weapons, Observer 1 noted. Your targeting systems are basic. Your movement speed is slow. Thompson nodded. You're right about all of that. Now let's show you what these primitive tanks can actually do. What followed was a display that had the aliens frantically checking their readings. The tanks drove through terrain they should have gotten stuck in, used techniques that defied their own operational limits, and performed maneuvers that the coalition's combat computers labeled as impossible. But the calculations clearly show these vehicles cannot function this way. Observer 4 protested, holding up a device showing complex mathematical formulas. That's the thing about humans, Thompson replied with a grin. We don't much care what the calculations say it is impossible. The final demonstration of the day involved a simulated space battle. The coalition provided one of their mid-sized warships for the exercise, while Earth used 3 of their outdated space vessels. The coalition ship was a marvel of technology, energy shields, plasma weapons, and AI-driven combat systems. The Earth ships looked like toys in comparison, but Thompson had a plan. The battle began, and at first, it went exactly as the aliens expected. Their ship easily evaded Earth's primitive targeting systems. Their shields absorbed the weak human weapons. Observer 1 actually looked bored. Then Thompson gave the signal. The Earth ships did something no logical combat computer could have predicted. 2 ships deliberately crashed their engines, creating a massive debris field. The 3rd ship used this cloud of wreckage as cover, somehow maneuvering through it in ways that should have torn the ship apart. The coalition vessel's AI couldn't track them through the chaos. Its logical combat protocols couldn't predict the seemingly random movements. Before anyone could react, the human ship emerged from the debris at point-blank range. Exercise completed, the range officer announced. Coalition vessel, theoretically destroyed. The silence that followed was deafening. That evening, Miller found the observers huddled together in their temporary office, surrounded by holographic displays of the day's events. They were speaking rapidly in their own language, their usual calm completely gone. As Miller walked past, he heard Observer 1 say something that made him stop. How do we defend against an enemy that doesn't follow any rules? That doesn't retreat when they should. That turns their own destroyed ships into weapons. This isn't warfare. It's chaos. Miller smiled to himself as he walked away. The aliens were beginning to understand, but they still didn't get the whole picture. Humans weren't just chaotic. They were something far more terrifying. Creative. In the Coalition's temporary research facility on Earth, Observer 1 stared at the holographic displays with growing concern. For the past week, his team had been studying Earth's military history, and what they found disturbed them deeply. Captain Miller stood nearby, watching as images from various human battles throughout history played in the air. The Battle of Thermopylae, the American Revolution, World War I resistance movements, Vietnam, modern guerrilla warfare. This cannot be correct, Observer 1 muttered, waving his hand to replay a sequence. These primitive humans defeated superior forces repeatedly. Miller nodded. It's happened throughout our history. Technology doesn't always decide who wins. The alien analysts had found a pattern, but it wasn't one they liked. Their advanced AI systems, designed to predict military outcomes, kept failing when applied to human conflicts. According to their calculations, the technically superior side should have won every time. But they didn't. Observer 3 rushed into the room, holding a datapad. Leader, you must see this. We've analyzed their entertainment media, what they call movies and video games. Even their fictional warfare makes no logical sense. Miller tried not to smile as the aliens watched clips from various action movies. Their expressions showed a mix of horror and fascination as humans on screen used household items as weapons, turned cars into bombs, and won battles through what the aliens called impossible coincidences. But these are just stories, Observer 1 said, though his voice held a note of uncertainty. Actually, Miller replied, many of these stunts were inspired by real events. The alien skin turned a paler shade of blue. Later that day, the coalition's military AI system tried to analyze a simple human tactic, playing dead on the battlefield, then attacking when the enemy passed. The computer crashed 3 times trying to understand the logic. Why would warriors pretend to be defeated? Observer 2 asked, genuinely confused. It is dishonorable. Winning isn't about honor, Miller explained. It's about survival. The next revelation came when they studied human resistance movements. The aliens watched in stunned silence as their computers showed how small groups of humans with minimal weapons managed to tie down entire armies. They hide among civilians, Observer 4 noted with something like fear in his voice. They strike and disappear. There's no way to predict where they will be. Your people turned everything into a weapon, Observer 1 said, replaying footage of improvised explosive devices, parts from vehicles, farming tools, cooking equipment. How can we defend against an enemy that sees weapons everywhere? The analysis continued into the evening. The aliens discovered something else that terrified them. Humans got more dangerous when they were losing. In every documented case, Observer 3 reported, when human forces face certain defeat, they become more creative, more aggressive, and more unpredictable. It defies all logical combat protocols. Miller watched as they stumbled upon the concept of spite. The aliens were horrified to learn that humans would sometimes keep fighting even when defeat was certain, just to hurt their enemy as much as possible before losing. Your kind would rather die than surrender, Observer 1 asked Miller directly. Sometimes, Miller replied. Depends on the situation. But that's not logical. No, Miller agreed. It's human. That night, as the coalition observers sent their daily report to their superiors, Miller overheard parts of their transmission. Human military doctrine appears to be. There is no doctrine. They adapt constantly. They ignore protocols. They break their own rules. When our simulation computers try to predict their actions, the most common result is system failure. There was a pause before Observer 1 added, most disturbing of all, they seem to enjoy this chaos. They celebrate their most unpredictable warriors. They teach their young to think in ways our combat computers cannot understand. The transmission ended with a warning. These humans are not merely primitive. They are something far worse. They are innovative. And in warfare, unpredictable innovation is more dangerous than any weapon. Miller walked away from the facility, smiling to himself. The aliens were finally starting to understand what made humans truly dangerous. Not their weapons, but their minds. And that was only the beginning. The day of the live fire exercise arrived with a tense atmosphere. The Coalition had brought their newest warship, the Starseeker, to Earth's orbit. It was massive, nearly 2 miles long, equipped with energy shields that could withstand nuclear blasts, and controlled by the most advanced AI combat system in the galaxy. Against this technological marvel, Earth had sent 3 small ships, an old destroyer, a cargo vessel, and a mining ship. Captain Miller stood in the Earth Defense Command Center, watching the screens alongside Commander Thompson and Admiral Peters. "This is embarrassing," Observer 1 said, looking at Earth's small fleet. "Perhaps we should cancel this exercise to spare your people the humiliation." Admiral Peters just smiled. "Let's proceed as planned." The test began simply enough. The Coalition ship moved into position, its golden shields glowing in the dark of space. Their AI combat system had calculated a 99.98% chance of victory. The alien observers watched confidently as their mighty vessel prepared to demonstrate its power. Then the humans did something unexpected. The cargo ship released its entire payload into space, thousands of metal containers, creating a massive field of debris. At the same time, the mining ship activated all its cutting lasers, not at the Coalition ship, but at the cargo containers, slicing them into smaller and smaller pieces. "What are they doing?" Observer 3 asked, confusion clear in his voice. "Those lasers cannot harm our vessel." Miller watched as the Coalition ship's AI tried to track all the debris. Its sensors were overwhelmed by the thousands of metal fragments now floating in space. The Starseeker's computers began to lag, trying to calculate the trajectory of every piece. Then the old destroyer made its move. Instead of attacking with its guns, it fired something else. Paint. Simple, ordinary paint, sprayed across the Coalition ship's front sensors. The alien vessel's AI, programmed to avoid any unknown substance, automatically raised shields to maximum power. "This is not proper combat," Observer 1 protested. "They are making a mess, not fighting." But the humans weren't done. The mining ship had used its industrial tractor beams to gather much of the floating debris into a loose cloud. With precise timing, it released the cloud just as the Coalition ship tried to move. The Starseeker's AI, faced with thousands of objects suddenly on a collision course, tried to calculate the safest path through. Its computers froze, overwhelmed by too many variables. The mighty warship hung motionless in space, paralyzed by indecision. The old destroyer struck then, firing its ancient chemical rockets not at the ship, but at the debris field around it. The explosions created more chaos, more variables, more unpredictability. The Coalition ship's AI crashed completely. "Exercise completed," announced the range officer. "Coalition vessel, disabled and blind." The silence in the command center was absolute. This is not fair," Observer 2 finally sputtered. "They used mining equipment, and paint, and garbage. All's fair in war," Thompson replied calmly. "You fight with what you have." The ground exercise that followed wasn't any better for the Coalition's pride. Their infantry units, equipped with powered armor and energy weapons, were defeated by human soldiers using mud, smoke, and improvised traps. The aliens' advanced targeting systems were useless against opponents who crawled through sewers and threw dirt at sensor arrays. Later that evening, Miller found the observers huddled in their quarters, frantically updating their reports to the Coalition High Command. He caught fragments of their conversation. "They turned our strength against us. How do we fight an enemy that uses paint as a weapon? Their primitive technology makes them more dangerous, not less. They don't even take combat seriously. They laugh while fighting." Observer 1 noticed Miller and straightened up. "Your people," he said slowly, "do not fight like a civilized species." "No," Miller agreed. "We fight to win." As he left the aliens to their reports, Miller reflected on the day's events. The Coalition had learned an important lesson. Humans didn't need advanced technology to be dangerous. Sometimes, a bucket of paint and a crazy idea were more effective than the most sophisticated weapons in the galaxy, and that scared them more than any superweapon could. News traveled fast in the galactic community. Within days of the live-fire exercise, ships from a dozen different alien species arrived in Earth's orbit. They came not to threaten, but to observe, to learn, to understand what had made the mighty coalition so nervous about a primitive species. Captain Miller watched from his office window as alien diplomats and military experts filed into the UN building. On his desk, reports from around the galaxy painted an interesting picture. The coalition's warning about humans had sparked something between fear and fascination among the stars. "They're studying Vietnam now," Commander Thompson said, walking into Miller's office with a tablet. "The small green aliens from Sector 7. They've been watching the footage for 3 days straight. They can't believe what they're seeing." Miller nodded. "What about the others?" "The rock-like species from the outer rim are obsessed with the American Revolution. They keep asking how farmers with muskets defeated the British Empire. And the floating gas beings. They're studying modern guerrilla warfare. I think we're freaking them out." A delegation of crystalline aliens had requested access to Earth's military history museums. They spent hours examining simple tools that humans had turned into weapons throughout history. Their translucent bodies flickered with nervous light when they learned about things like the slingshot, the Molotov cocktail, and the sharpened stick. In orbit, alien scientists analyzed human weapons. They were baffled. By their standards, everything was backwards. Humans used physical projectiles instead of energy beams. They relied on explosive chemicals instead of plasma. Their ships needed actual people to operate them instead of AI. And yet, we found another disturbing pattern. Observer 1 reported to his superiors. When humans advance their technology, they don't replace their old weapons. They keep them as backup options. They have something called low-tech solutions for when high-tech fails. The fear spread further when the aliens discovered human resistance fighters. The concept terrified them. The idea that defeated humans wouldn't stay defeated, that they would hide among civilians and continue fighting for years, decades, even generations. It went against everything the galactic community understood about warfare. "These humans," a tentacled alien scientist wrote in his report, "do not accept loss as final. They adapt. They hide. They wait. And most terrifying of all, they teach their children to do the same." One morning, Miller found Observer 1 staring at footage of human children playing war games. "Even their younglings practice chaos," the alien said softly. "Look, they make pretend weapons from sticks. They hide. They ambush. They learn to think like humans." Reports from alien military analysts became increasingly alarmed. They have no standard tactics to counter. Their combat doctrines change too quickly to study. They treat war like a game, but fight it with deadly seriousness. Even their entertainment teaches unpredictability. The final straw came when the aliens studied human sports. They watched in horror as humans deliberately crashed into each other in something called football, threw themselves off high places for fun, and climbed mountains without safety equipment just because they were there. "These creatures," one alien commander wrote, "treat their own lives like they treat warfare, with a mix of reckless abandon and calculated risk that our computers cannot comprehend." In the Coalition's temporary headquarters, Miller found the observers watching old videos of hockey fights. "Your people," Observer 1 said, "do this for entertainment." "Sometimes," Miller replied. "Depends on the game." And then they shake hands afterward. Usually, the alien's skin turned a pale blue. A species that treats violence as sport, chaos as strategy, and death as merely an inconvenience. He shuddered. The galaxy is not prepared for humans. As Miller left the building that evening, he saw new alien ships arriving in orbit. They came not with weapons but with questions, not with threats but with concerns. Each one wanted to know the same thing. How do you fight an enemy that doesn't fight the way they're supposed to? The answer, of course, was simple. You don't. You just try to make sure they stay on your side. The coalition's high command called an emergency meeting. Representatives from 50 alien species gathered in their grand chamber to discuss one simple, terrifying topic: humans. Captain Miller and Commander Thompson attended as Earth's representatives, watching as the aliens tried to make sense of humanity. High Commander Vale, a tall being with silver skin, stood at the center of the chamber. Behind him, giant screens showed scenes from human history. After 3 months of study, Vale announced, "Our experts have identified why humans are so dangerous in warfare. The results are disturbing." The first image showed human soldiers fighting with broken weapons. They don't stop when their equipment fails, Vale explained. They simply find new ways to fight. Observer 1 stepped forward. "We watched a human training exercise where they lost all weapons. Instead of surrendering, they used rocks. And they won." The next image showed humans fighting in different environments: deserts, jungles, cities, and snow. "They adapt to any situation," Vale continued. "Our species specialize in specific combat environments. Humans just adjust." Miller noticed how the alien leaders shifted uncomfortably in their seats as Vale moved to the next point. "Most troubling is their response to defeat," Vale said. "When normal species lose a battle, they retreat. When humans lose a battle," he paused, his silver skin rippling with emotion, "they get creative." The screen showed historical images: trapped soldiers making weapons from garbage, defeated armies turning into guerrilla fighters, civilians joining resistance movements. "They have a saying," Observer 3 added nervously, "necessity is the mother of invention." When humans are losing, they become most innovative, most unpredictable, most dangerous. Thompson leaned over to Miller and whispered, "They really don't like that part, do they?" The next revelation made several alien leaders leave the room in distress. "Humans," Vale announced, "enjoy combat simulations. They turn warfare into games. Their young play at battle for fun. They imagine war scenarios for entertainment." The screens showed children playing soldier, video games, paintball matches, and military training exercises. "How can we predict an enemy?" one alien leader asked, "who practices chaos for entertainment?" Vale moved to his final point. The screen showed human victories against superior forces throughout history. "The most dangerous thing about humans," he said, "is that they don't know they're supposed to lose." Observer 1 stepped forward again. "We showed them our advanced technology, explained why their weapons were primitive, demonstrated our superior combat systems. They just smiled and said, 'We'll see.'" The chamber erupted in worried discussion. Miller heard fragments of conversation. "They think differently. Can't predict them. Turn anything into a weapon. Never know when they're beaten." High Commander Vale raised his hands for silence. "Our military experts have reached 3 conclusions about humans in warfare." The room grew quiet as he listed them. "First, human creativity increases under pressure. The more we force them to adapt, the more dangerous they become. Second, their primitive technology makes them more threatening, not less. They understand their tools completely and can use them in ways we never imagined. Third, and most important, humans do not approach warfare with logic. They use something far more dangerous: imagination." The silence in the chamber was absolute. Then an alien leader spoke up. "What do we do about them?" Vale looked at Miller and Thompson. "We accept them as they are, and we pray they stay friendly." Later, as Miller and Thompson prepared to return to Earth, Observer 1 approached them. "We finally understand," he said. "You're not terrible at war. You just fight differently than any species we've ever encountered." Miller smiled. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" The alien's skin shifted colors several times before he answered. "Both. That's what makes humans so terrifying. We never know if you're going to be our greatest allies or our worst nightmare." "Why not both?" Thompson asked with a grin. Observer One's skin turned pale again. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly what we're afraid of." As they boarded their ship home, Miller reflected on how the galaxy had changed its view of humanity. They weren't respected for their technology or their strength. They were feared for their creativity, their adaptability, their unpredictability. And somehow, that was even better. 6 months after first contact, the Coalition made a historic announcement. Earth would join the galactic community, not as a primitive species needing guidance, but as a major military power. Captain Miller stood on the stage at the United Nations as High Commander Vale delivered the news to representatives from both Earth and the Coalition. "We came to Earth expecting to find a primitive species," Vale began, his silver skin gleaming under the lights. "Instead, we found something unique in the galaxy, a race that turns its weaknesses into strengths." The audience, a mix of humans and aliens, listened intently. In the front row, Observer One sat with his team, their blue skin now a familiar sight on Earth. "The Coalition hereby recognizes Earth as our primary military training center," Vale continued. "All species will send their forces here to learn what we now call human tactical thinking." Miller couldn't help but smile at that. The aliens had created a whole new military term just to describe how humans fought. The changes happened quickly. Within weeks, alien soldiers arrived on Earth for training. They learned things that seemed obvious to humans, but revolutionary to them. How to fight when technology fails. How to use simple tools in creative ways. How to think unpredictably. How to adapt to chaos. At the new Earth Defense Academy, Commander Thompson taught alien troops how to fight with whatever they had available. The sight of advanced alien warriors learning to use sticks and stones as weapons was both funny and profound. "Remember," Thompson told a class of confused-looking aliens, "the best weapon isn't the most powerful one. It's the one your enemy doesn't expect." In orbit, human space crews trained alien ships in what they called creative maneuvering. The aliens learned that sometimes crashing your own ship could be a valid tactic. Their AI systems nearly crashed trying to understand this concept. Observer One, now the head of the Coalition's Human Studies Department, documented everything. "Humans have changed how we think about warfare," he reported. "They showed us that unpredictability is more powerful than technology." One day, Miller found Observer One watching Earth children play in a park. Some were playing hide and seek, while others had an imaginary sword fight with sticks. "Still studying us?" Miller asked. The alien nodded. "We thought we understood warfare. We had perfected it with technology and AI. Then we met humans." He gestured at the playing children. "Your young ones naturally think in ways our greatest military minds struggle to understand." "Is that why the Coalition really wanted Earth to join?" Miller asked. "Yes," Observer One admitted. "We realized something important. The galaxy is full of unknown threats. And who better to face the unknown than a species that thrives on chaos?" The final ceremony marking Earth's full membership in the Coalition was held in New York. Ships from 100 alien species filled the sky. On the ground, human soldiers stood alongside alien warriors, teaching them games like capture the flag and paintball. High Commander Vale made one last speech. "The Coalition thought we needed to teach humans about modern warfare. Instead, humans taught us something more valuable, that the strongest weapon isn't a plasma cannon or an AI battle computer. It's the ability to adapt, to think creatively, to turn disadvantage into advantage." He turned to where Miller and Thompson stood. "We fear humans because they were terrible at war by our standards. Now we respect them because they're excellent at war by their own standards." Later that night, at the celebration party, Miller watched as alien soldiers tried to learn human dance moves. Like human warfare, the dancing made no logical sense to them, but they were trying to understand. "Quite a change from when they first arrived," Thompson said, joining him. "Remember how they thought we were primitive?" Miller nodded. "Now they're studying our primitive ways like their advanced technology." Observer One approached them, holding what looked like a water balloon. Another human concept the aliens were struggling to understand. "We've learned so much from humans," he said. "But there's one thing we still don't understand." "What's that?" Miller asked. "How do you make chaos look so easy?" Miller smiled. "That's simple," he said. "We don't see it as chaos. We see it as opportunity." And that perhaps was the greatest lesson humans taught the galaxy. Sometimes the best way to face the unknown is to embrace it. The end.